Good afternoon, and welcome to NASA's Lunar Delivery Readiness for the agency's Commercial Lunar Payload Services, or CLPS initiative, and Artemis campaign. I'm Antonia Jaramillo with NASA's Office of Communications. Carrying NASA science demonstrations, Intuitive Machines' Nova-C lander is scheduled to launch aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket at 12:57 a.m. Eastern Time, February 14th from Launch Complex 39A at the agency's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This will mark Intuitive Machines' first mission to the lunar surface. Recently, teams with NASA and Intuitive Machines met to confirm all NASA payloads flying on board are go for launch. Here to talk with us about the NASA Science and CLPS initiative are Joel Kearns, Deputy Associate Administrator for Exploration with the Science Mission Directorate at NASA headquarters, Debra Needham, Program Scientist in the Exploration Science Strategy and Integration Office at NASA headquarters, Trent Martin, Vice President of Space Systems with Intuitive Machines, Bill Gerstenmaier, Vice President for Build and Flight Reliability at SpaceX, and Arlena Moses, Launch Weather Officer at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station's 45th Weather Squadron. After brief opening remarks from each of our speakers, we will take your questions. You can enter *1 on your phone to be entered into the question queue at any time. Your phones are on mute now, and the operator will open your mic when we're ready and close your mic after you ask your question. We ask that you please stick to one question and identify to whom your question is directed. Shortly after we conclude, you can listen to a replay of this teleconference online. First, we will hear from Joel Kearns. Joel?
Hey, thank you, Tony. Thanks for everyone for joining today. All 6 NASA science and technology payloads on Intuitive Machines Mission 1 are go for launch. Remember, IM-1 is Intuitive Machines' first mission to land on the moon, and it's also their first mission to carry NASA and science technology payloads to the lunar surface using our Commercial Lunar Payload Services initiative. Through CLPS, NASA purchases end-to-end lunar delivery services from U.S. companies to take NASA payloads to the moon, and each company is responsible for its own launch services, communications, lander design, lander operation, and to get our data back from the moon to our scientists and engineers. At NASA, we completed our Lunar Delivery Readiness Review on February 2nd and verified that all of our science and technology payloads are ready to go. I want to remind you that IM-1 is an Intuitive Machines mission. It's not a NASA mission. Intuitive Machines has manifested commercial payloads beyond those that were contracted by NASA. 6 years ago, U.S. industry said they were ready for NASA to purchase robotic lunar landings as a service instead of us doing it ourselves. These first CLPS landings are a test of that. We know from observing the different companies that each CLPS company has their own technical approaches, their own strengths, their own way of doing these landings. But I want to highlight that landing on the moon is extremely challenging. You've probably seen that all over the past year. Success of every landing was never assured. NASA is using CLPS to get our science investigations and technologies tests done on the moon's surface and to develop a commercial community of robotic landing service providers for Artemis. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you, Joel. Next up, we have Debra.
Thank you, Tony. Today, I am pleased to report on the readiness of the NASA payloads for launch on SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket and for delivery to the lunar surface aboard Intuitive Machines' Nova-C lander. There are 6 NASA payloads aboard tonight's launch that aim to demonstrate technologies that will enhance the efficiency, precision, and safety of future spacecraft landings, as well as investigate the surface of the south polar region of the moon. The 6 NASA payloads on board Intuitive Machines' Nova-C lander include the stereo cameras for lunar plume surface studies, which will investigate how the lunar surface changes as a result of the engine plume kicking up the lunar soil during landing. The radio wave observations at the lunar surface of the photoelectron sheath, which will characterize the blanket of electrons dislodged from the lunar surface by incoming radiation from the sun, and detect bursts of radio waves emitted by the sun, Jupiter, and Earth. The radio frequency mass gauge, which will measure and monitor propellant levels in the low-gravity environment of space to help improve understanding of how quickly spacecraft use up propellant. The navigation Doppler LiDAR, which will scan the surface to detect small craters and boulders, helping landers avoid hazardous surface features to promote a safe touchdown. The Lunar Retroreflector Array, which will act as a position marker on the lunar surface for decades to come, and Lunar Node 1, a navigation beacon that will act as a lighthouse guiding future spacecraft to precise locations during descent and landing. All 6 NASA payloads have been successfully tested, processed, and integrated onto Intuitive Machines Nova-C lander, and they're ready to go out for delivery to the moon. With that, I'm thrilled to confirm that all 6 NASA payloads are go for launch. Tony, back to you.
Thanks, Debra. Now moving on to Trent.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk with everyone today. It is a profoundly humbling moment for all of us at Intuitive Machines. The opportunity to return the United States to the moon for the first time since 1972 is a feat of engineering that demands a hunger to explore, and that's at the heart of everyone at Intuitive Machines. We're not overlooking the challenges that lie ahead. Any venture into uncharted territories carries risk, yet this willingness to embrace the risk and push beyond our comfort zones propels us forward and drives innovation. Over the past week, IM and SpaceX have performed 2 wet dress rehearsals where we filled the Nova-C Odysseus fuel tanks and practiced for today's pre-launch events. Intuitive Machines and SpaceX have analyzed the data from the lunar lander fueling test and determined the testing campaign is complete. IM and Odysseus is go for launch. I thought I might use today's talk to tell you a little bit about the mission and some of the key activities that you will see over the coming days. Shortly after launch and after launch vehicle separation, the vehicle performs an autonomous commissioning, followed shortly after in the first day by a commissioning burn, which is the first time ever that our liquid oxygen, liquid methane rocket engine will burn in space. We have multiple opportunities to do TCMs, trajectory correction maneuvers, on our way to the moon, 3 opportunities to do that, followed by a lunar orbit insertion burn that allows us to capture into low lunar orbit. We will fly in low lunar orbit for around 24 hours, and then we will perform a descent orbit insertion where our terrain relative navigation device will help us perform our powered descent initiation, our pitch over for our main engine, where our main engine will fire as we do our hazard detection and avoidance, and a vertical descent, terminal descent, and landing on the moon. We will land on the moon on February the 22nd. We expect to start autonomous landing sequence and DOI a little more than an hour before the anticipated landing. Intuitive Machines and its customers, which include the 6 NASA payloads that you just heard about and 6 commercial payloads, expect to operate on the lunar surface for 7 days before the sun sets on our landing site at Malapert A on the south pole of the moon, rendering the IM-1 mission complete. During this time, we will be performing some amazing experiments and technology demonstrations that will pave the way for the future of lunar missions. I'm extremely proud of our entire IM team, and I want to take this opportunity to thank them for their dedication to mission success. Godspeed, Odysseus. Now let's go make history.
Thanks, Trent. Next up, we have Bill with SpaceX.
SpaceX is tremendously proud to be part of this historic private mission to the moon. We've spent a lot of time working with Intuitive Machines to get ready for the launch tonight. We did the 2 practice dress runs that Trent talked about, and we even went back in Houston before that, and we practiced and participated with Intuitive as they loaded liquid oxygen and methane into their spacecraft. It's not trivial to load liquid oxygen and liquid methane into the vehicle. We modified the second stage of Falcon to accommodate that. There's a new quick disconnect on the side of the rocket that allows that propellant to flow into their spacecraft. We actually control 6 of the valves on their vehicle, and we actually monitor and ensure that we load the proper amount of propellant into their vehicle for launch. The Falcon 9 rocket is ready to go fly. The teams are ready. We've practiced. We've done a lot of homework. As you heard earlier, this is not an easy mission for us. I think it's tremendously exciting to see 2 private companies working together in this historic moment to deliver these 6 commercial payloads and 6 NASA payloads to the surface of the moon. And again, SpaceX and the team members from SpaceX are tremendously proud to be part of this historic mission. And we're ready, and we're ready for whatever comes in the days ahead. And that concludes my remarks, and back to you, Tony.
Thank you, Bill. And last but certainly not least, we have Arlena Moses with our launch weather team.
Thank you, Tony. For those of you who are here on the Space Coast this afternoon, hopefully you're enjoying the lovely late winter weather that we're seeing. Had a cold front come through overnight last night and has ushered in a cool and dry air mass across the area with just some passing mid and high clouds. And the same weather we're seeing now is the weather we'll see going into our launch opportunity late tonight. So not tracking too significant of any concerns. Just have to keep an eye on some of these mid and high clouds. As long as they stay as thin as they are right now, don't expect any concerns. Overall, watching a potential of violation for our thick cloud layer rule, which is what we would watch with these type of clouds, of only 5% right now. Should we have to go into tomorrow, weather tracking pretty much the same, still in this nice late winter air mass, and just a few more high clouds around. So we'd be looking at the potential of violating, once again, the thick cloud layer rule of 10%. So weather is looking good, and we'll do our part to help with this mission. Back to you, Tony.
Thank you. We will now begin the question and answer portion. Please remember to stick to one question and identify to whom it is directed. If we have time, we'll allow reporters to ask a second question. Again, you can enter *1 on your phone to be entered in the queue at any time, and you can enter *2 if you'd like to be removed from the queue. First up, we have Marcia Dunn with the Associated Press. Marcia?
Yes, hi. For Trent Martin, please. If you launch tomorrow, what day will you arrive at the moon to go into orbit? And does that arrival date change if the launch slips by a day or two? And for the 22nd, do you have any idea what time of day here on Earth you will be attempting the touchdown? Thanks.
Thank you, Marcia, for the question. Whether we launch the 14th, 15th, or 16th, we go into orbit around the moon about 24 hours prior to touchdown. We will touch down late in the day on the 22nd, and we'll release the exact time at a later date.
Thanks, Trent. Next up, we have Bill Harwood with CBS.
Thank you very much. I have one question, but it's got three parts, so apologies, Tony. For Trent, what is the duration of the LOI burn? And I realize it could be variable, but give me a ballpark if you can. I'm also looking for the total time between leaving that 100-kilometer orbit to touchdown. And then finally, I'm wondering at what altitude you guys begin powered descent. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to answer that backwards. I will start with, we go into about 100-kilometer circular orbit around the moon. For the exact duration of LOI burn, I'll have to get you that answer. I don't have the answer at the tip of my tongue. And the last question you had was what?
It was the total time to orbit and touchdown, between orbit and touchdown.
Yeah, okay. That's about an hour long process between the time that we initiate that powered descent until we touch down on the surface.
Thanks, Trent. Next up, we have Michael Sheets with CNBC.
For Joel, I'm curious on the total NASA contract value for this mission. I haven't seen a recently updated number on what the total value of the NASA side of the payment was, and that as well for Trent, what's the total mission contract value when you include the commercial customers as well? Thanks.
Hey, this is Joel. Thanks for the question. So NASA is paying Intuitive Machines just a little under $118 million to carry out this lunar delivery for us and get us of our instruments and get our data back from the moon. In addition, we ended up spending a little less than $11 million to actually develop and build our 6 scientific instruments that we gave to Intuitive Machines to fly to the moon.
Creating an entire lunar program for a fixed price in the time it takes to get an undergraduate degree is a pressure cooker for innovation. Roughly, Intuitive Machines developed an entire lunar program with the lander being the tip of the iceberg for about the same cost of the TO award, with additional commercial payloads, providing some additional resources. That market is expanding, and we've seen that as we've looked at our upcoming missions, IM-2, 3, and even missions beyond IM-3. And so we are seeing that market grow and expand, and we expect that at some point in the future, NASA would not be the lion's share of the overall cost or overall price of a mission. It might end up being more leaning towards commercial, a good commercial NASA mixture.
Thanks, Trent. Next up, we have Kenneth Chang with the New York Times.
Hi, thank you. This is for Bill Gerstenmaier. Is the launch sending the spacecraft directly to the translunar injection?
We have a set of parameters that we've worked with IM to essentially set them on the target trajectory towards the moon. And that varies slightly from day to day, from the 14th, 15th, and 16th. And Trent, you might want to add anything.
Yeah, I will say we do not go into orbit around the Earth. And once we are separated from the Falcon 9, we use our engine to do the final maneuvers and land, and then go into orbit around the moon and then land on the moon.
Thank you. Next up, we have Isam Ahmed with AFP.
Hi, thank you for that. For Trent, I was wondering what is the big advantage of the liquid oxygen propulsion system, and why is that such a selling point for Intuitive Machines? Thanks.
That's a great question. I appreciate it. We actually have a difference compared to some of our competitors that you've seen over the last few years, in that we are using a cryogenic propulsion system that allows us the opportunity to have a very large rocket engine, which means, one, we don't spend a lot of time in Earth orbit, so we don't go through the Van Allen belts and get the high radiation on our electronics, which we believe is an advantage to the electronics and to our payload customers. And then two, it allows us to get to the moon very, very fast. As you can see from this mission, launching on the 14th, arriving on the 22nd. It's a very quick trip to the moon compared to some of our competitors, which take a very long time to get to the moon. It allows us to operate very quickly. The next piece that we like to talk about when it comes to liquid oxygen, liquid methane, is that we believe that liquid methane, is the future. The technology that rocket providers are building now is moving to a lot of liquid oxygen, liquid methane. It's easy to use, it's clean, it is a shirt sleeve environment. It doesn't require us to operate in with some of the crazy parameters that you have to with some of the other propulsion systems. We also believe that once you get to Mars, and maybe even on the moon, you have the opportunity to harvest methane on Mars, or to create methane or at least oxygen on the moon. So it allows you a potential to have a reusable rocket using in situ resources.
Thanks, Trent. Next up, we have Will Robinson-Smith with Spaceflight Now.
Yes, hi, Will Robinson-Smith, Spaceflight Now. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us this afternoon, and good luck tomorrow. Question for Bill Gerstenmaier, if I may. With the new capabilities that were brought on board to support the IM-1 mission, assuming they'll be in use for future IM-1 Nova-C landers, but do you foresee this being a capability that other commercial customers may rely upon? In other words, is it sort of a niche, bespoke capability just for this type of mission, or do you imagine that it may open up the marketplace for other opportunities now that it's in existence? Thanks.
Yeah, we see this as a capability that can be used by other providers in the future. We're essentially supercooling both the liquid methane and the liquid oxygen, and we load them on the rocket. And so the way we do that, we modified the 39A launch pad to service both of those propellants. In fact, we're chilling in the methane heat exchanger right now, even as we're talking today, to get ready to get the cold temperatures to get the propellant to meet the conditions that Intuitive needs for their rocket. But we see this as pretty much a generic capability. We spent a lot of time qualifying the disconnect to make sure that it could separate properly during any launch environment. We route the lines up through the second stage, up through a payload adapter fitting into the IM spacecraft. Again, all of that is generic and can be used by IM in their future missions and also can be used in other missions for other providers. So we think we have a pretty generic capability that allows us to have a very unique capability to provide both liquid oxygen and liquid methane for future customers. So we see this as a way of essentially advancing what kind of services we can provide to future users in the future.
Thanks, Bill. Next up, we have Marcia Smith with Space Policy Online.
Thanks so much. My question is for Trent. Could you give us a schedule for how often we can expect to get updates from you? Will there be daily updates? And will the landing be webcast?
We will have, we will have updates at least once daily on the IM1 webpage, as well as the as our X account. You will see both the launch and the landing live cast. Also, the landing is streamed on NASA television, so you'll see that tonight. Starting at, and for DOI, for landing, we will start at our DOI event all the way through landing.
Thanks, Trent. Next up, we have Jeff Brumfield with NPR.
Hi there. This question's for Bill and maybe Trent as well. You know, we just last month had the failure of the Astrobotic mission. I guess if IM1 fails, if you have a problem, where does that leave the CLPS program and kind of NASA's strategy of trying to buy these commercial flights generally? Is that going to put it into trouble, do you think, or will you forge ahead?
Hey, this is Joel Kearns from NASA headquarters. You know, we've always viewed these initial CLPS deliveries as being kind of a learning experience where we're all going to learn and react to how they go. We knew going into this, as I said, you know, in my opening comment, that we didn't believe that success was assured. You know, as these U.S. companies for the first time go to the moon, something that nobody's done robotically since in the U.S. since 1968, and the last Apollo mission was 1972. So what I can tell you is that, you know, we're learning from every attempt, not only that we have in the U.S., but we also watch the attempts being made by some of our allies and some of our competitors. So, for example, I will tell you that we were really happy with how open and transparent Astrobotic technology was during their Peregrine mission, what they communicated both to us and to the world, and also how transparent the Japanese Space Exploration Agency was in their SLIM landing. So what I'll tell you is that we take all that into account as we move forward on our agency initiatives, including CLPS.
Yeah, as partners in advancing lunar exploration, IM understands and shares the collective disappointment of unforeseen challenges. And despite meticulous planning and rigorous testing, the harsh requirements for space exploration can introduce unexpected factors that impact mission outcomes. It's a testament to the resilience of the space community that we continue to push the boundaries of our understanding and embracing the inherent risks in our pursuit of opening access to the moon for the progress of humanity. I will say that from our perspective, we believe that the CLPS program is a success, even if you don't have successes all the way to landing on the moon. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. Simply us developing the liquid oxygen, liquid methane propulsion systems, the new tanks that we've developed that are COPV Type 5s, our navigation systems that we've developed, and reaching a technology readiness level 9 in the very short amount of time with the very small amount relatively small amount of money that has been put in, we believe that advances the state of aerospace and the capabilities of the United States to go to the moon.
Thanks all. Next up, we have Jim Siegel with...
I could add something from a SpaceX standpoint. Again, there's no guarantee of success on this mission, but I can say we worked extensively with Intuitive Machines to buy down as much risk as we can. We did the 2 wet dresses to make sure that we could use auto sequences to command the valves on their spacecraft to meet the precise propellant conditions and quantities that they needed. And we spent time even back in Houston refining those procedures. We worked extremely cooperatively with Intuitive to make sure all the kind of risks that we can identify between ourselves have been mitigated, but again, there's no assurance of success. But I think it shows how well the private sector can work together and cooperate together in a very open and transparent manner to accomplish this mission. To be part of the lunar program and to be part of an activity taking these payloads to the surface of the moon, which will actually help even the Artemis program in the future, is a tremendous honor for us at SpaceX. And we wanted to give it our best, so we've worked as hard as we can with Intuitive to buy down all the risks we can, and we'll see if how much our hard work pays off as we go forward.
Thanks all, and sorry for interrupting you, Bill. Next up, we have Jim Siegel with NASA Tech.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for taking my question, and good luck in the launch tonight. This is kind of a follow-up to a previous question. I'm hearing frequently how challenging this launch will be and how challenging the mission is. And yet, when my readers read this, they come back to me and say, well, why? How can that be? NASA got people to the moon 50 years ago. Why not just resurrect the old Saturn rockets and all the other gear? You probably have the blueprint someplace. Make something like that and put it up on the moon. How would you say that I should respond to that? Thank you.
Hey, this is Joel Kearns from NASA. I guess what I would say is that we know how to do things. We believe a lot. We can do a lot more and things a lot better using the state of the art over the last 50 years. I mean, nobody had reusable rockets 50 years ago. We didn't have the computers or sensors or software we have today. We didn't have VR or AI. There's just so much that's different from the time of Apollo. You know, when we sent Apollo, we sent Surveyor out to the moon in the 1970s. That was not easy during that time. There were they had to, in addition for all the effort they had to expend to develop those launch vehicles and those spacecraft and everything on the ground, there were a lot of work they had to do, a lot of tests. It took a lot of time. There was launch, as you know, there were major mishaps on the ground and in flight with some missions, and it costed a really a large amount of money compared to if you look at inflated dollars today. So what we're trying to do now, you know, we're not trying to redo Apollo or redo Surveyor. What we're doing today is we're going after scientific and technology studies that weren't even envisioned back at the time of Apollo to answer like major scientific questions. And we're going to a region of the moon, particularly, you know, this mission with IM and Artemis, that people and robots have never been to really look for new things, like look for the source, look to see if there really is usable volatiles like water ice on the South Pole and on the moon, and also to go to various other places around the moon robotically to answer these major scientific questions. This won't be some people considered Apollo a one-shot. You know, it happened over several missions from 69 to 72. This is supposed to be a sustainable effort to really explore and investigate the moon, to bring the benefits back to the United States and our friends and allies. And it's not just a short foray there and then kind of come back. It's going to end up being really either the knowledge we get or the actual location is going to end up being our jumping off point to send people to Mars and to other planets after Mars. So this is a totally different thing, and you couldn't do it the way that we had set out and successfully did Apollo in the 1960s.
I would add to that. So I completely agree. I completely agree that the blueprint is different. The sustainability aspect of what we're trying to do is completely different. The other piece that is different, in particular with commercial lunar payload services, is the commercial aspect of what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a marketplace in a place where it didn't exist. But to do that, we have to do it in a cost-conscious manner. So when you have unlimited funds, like they did during the Apollo days, yes, you can do incredible things. And many of us in the space program are in the space program because of Apollo, because of what they showed could be done. Now, can we find a way to do it for a lower cost? Can we find a way to do it where there's a marketplace that is not driven solely by government funds? Can we find a way to do it in a way that is in line with what SpaceX has managed to do in the commercial launch industry, which is driving the prices down and allowing us to launch many, many more things now than could have ever been thought just 10 years ago? We want to do that in cislunar space.
Thanks all. Next up, we have Irene Klotz with Aviation Week.
Much. My question's for Gerst. Is there anything particularly different about the launch requirements for the IM-1 mission compared to some of SpaceX's previous lunar missions, including the Space IL and the iSpace launch and even the South Korean lunar orbiter?
I think the thing for us that's a little bit unique here is we're actually loading the spacecraft with liquid methane and liquid oxygen inside the fairing. And we do that in the launch sequence before we start loading the Falcon rocket. So we have to kind of get the propellants in the right conditions with the right temperatures so they'll warm up a little bit as we then go load the rest of the Falcon rocket to go launch it. So with our typical Falcon launches, the payload is kind of a separate entity that's on top, and it doesn't interact much with the launch sequence or the launch timing. But in this case, they're very much integrated. So we load the liquid propellants into the IM Intuitive Machines lander, and then we go load the rocket. So it's a little different sequence for us and a little more intense for us and a little bit longer timeline than we typically have.
Thanks, Trent. Next up, we have Marcia Smith with Space Policy Online.
Thanks so much for allowing me a second question. I wanted to ask Bill Gerstenmaier, if this gets off tonight, will you be able to launch Crew 8 on February 22nd? And if this slips a day or two, will you still be able to hold that date?
Yeah, Crew 8's right now February 28th, and it's going to, I think, stay on that date. If we slip a couple days, we might have to move a little bit, but right now we're aiming for I think the 28th of February.
Thanks, Bill. We have time for one final question. Michael Sheets with CNBC, your line is now open.
Thanks. Appreciate the extra question here. Trent, I just wanted to follow up and ask for the dollar figure on the commercial side of those contracts. In addition to, we have a total combined value of both commercial and NASA for my previous question. But the real question I have, which is for Joel, is on the Astrobotic mission and learnings from that mission. How much of that, because of the way these contracts are set up, have you been able to share with Intuitive Machines? What NASA's learned from it, what they're able to maybe, data sharing that's still possible underneath these agreements, as opposed to how maybe NASA would do it in the past, where it's all under one roof and everyone can talk about what's going on. I understand there's some proprietary distinctions that might be needed there, but I'm curious if there's any learnings you pass along to the Intuitive Machines team.
Yeah, if I can start with that one, Joel.
Go ahead, Trent.
So, we don't publish our actual costs on that. However, I will defer you to Josh Marshall, our public relations person, and hopefully he can get you a little more information on that. One thing that I have seen, to answer a little bit of the question that you asked Joel, is that one thing that we found is that in opportunities that we have with NASA, we found ways commercially to add additional science, additional value to some of those experiments by combining efforts that are happening on the commercial side with efforts that are happening on the NASA side, thus creating additional data that the government might be able to utilize. And so there's a new market that has started to evolve that's around data, not just around a mission, but instead around data that the government or other entities might be interested in having, right? So if you're doing prospecting of the surface or you have imagery of the surface, we have found that data to be quite valuable, not only to the government, but also to other entities. they're interested in doing commercial activities on the moon.
This is Joel Kearns to answer part of the second question. But, I said earlier that we were really happy in the government that groups like Astrobotic Technology are really open with NASA and with the wider, public about what happened, what they know to date happened on their first mission. They also did a virtual meeting, Astrobotic did, with all the other CLPS companies to brief the other CLPS companies about what they found, what they thought at the time, which we were also really happy that we did. We have to be careful in the government that we are not disclosing companies' proprietary information, which could be the way they differentiate themselves in the market or provide their competitive advantage. But we've been really happy. We have encouraged the companies to share when they see something that's anomalous, what they saw, and then the other companies can decide based on that how they want to incorporate that and how they're going to move forward.
Thanks all. And we actually have one more question in the queue. Marcia Dunn with the Associated Press. Your line is now open.
Yes, hi. I'm not sure if it's for Bill or Trent. If you don't get off this week, when precisely in March could you try again? Would it be a full 4-week stand down, or could you go earlier in the month?
Yeah, so the physics is physics, and the moon comes back around at pretty much the exact same time. So we would have to work with SpaceX to work out the exact window. And so let's see how this week goes. We are hopeful. It looks like weather is good, the vehicle's good, SpaceX is good. I think we're go for launch tonight.
Thanks, Trent. We love to hear that. And thank you to all who submitted questions and to today's briefers for taking the time to discuss NASA's CLPS initiative. As a reminder, Intuitive Machines is scheduled to launch aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket at 12:57 a.m. February 14th. Our live launch broadcast will start at 12:15 a.m. and will air on NASA Plus, NASA Television, the NASA app, and the agency's website. Thanks again, and that will conclude our call.